We'd like to welcome everyone today to our program, Embrace the Digital World Rurapuk Social Project in Lima, Peru. So first, let me explain the word Rurapuk. It's a word from the Quechua language, which was the language that which was spoken in the ancient Incan civilization, and it's still spoken today in Peru. So as Krishna Prema mentioned, the project was started by a 76-year-old lady. And can we go back to the first slide? Yeah. So here on the right side, you can see our building where the in-person part of the project takes place. And on the left side, you can see the community which we serve. That's in the hills around Lima. Okay, so you go to the next slide now. So this is the first day of the project. And this was the crew of the first day, the kids, some of our volunteers, Asha, her daughter Maitrey, myself, the first day of the project in 2001. Okay. And I remember Asha on that first day cried out of emotion because she said her goal in life was to do something for poor kids. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So what is our purpose? Our purpose is happiness. And I believe that you get this kind of true happiness and contentment through education and through having a nourished body and mind and spirit. Okay, next slide, please. So where is Peru? Peru is on the Pacific coast of the South American continent. So you see the country of Peru, and in the country of Peru, the department of Lima, the province of Lima, and we are in the district of Lima called Villa Maria Triunfo. Okay, next slide, please. The Rurapuk project is governed by AMURT, Peru, and here's our 5-person governing board. Okay, next slide. So let's look at a little bit of the history of the Rurapuk project and how we got from those the 76-year-old lady to jumping into the digital world. So in our 22-year history, we've had many different programs. Our first program was a vegetarian hot lunch program, which ran from 2002 to 2013. Next slide. Here's Carla and her story as a kid who was in the hot lunch program. She says, I learned that we are a happy family. Rurapuk is a place that helps those who most need help, a place that has helped us a lot. The vegetarian lunch helped me to eat. When we came from school, they gave us fruits and vegetables. Okay, next, please. We had a daycare program from 2013 to 2014. Next, please. And here's a little boy who was in the daycare program, ACIO. He says, we learn crafts, how to eat vegetables, how to share with your friends, and the importance of caring for animals. Next. tutoring program from 2012 to 2013. Next, please. And here's what Joseph said about the tutoring program. The people in Rurapuk looked after us. It was beautiful for me because it felt like a family, like I was cared for and protected. Next, a homework help program from 2014 to 2016. One of the mothers from that program, Maria, this is what she said about her son. At Rurapuk, my son learned to do chores and his homework. Before he was naughty. He would run here and there, and still he is a little restless, but is changing little by little and doing better. Okay, and a summer camp in 2014 and 2015. Here's what Andrea said about the summer camp. I learned a lot of things, like sharing, understanding other people. For the first time, I went to Waskar Park and rode a horse with my brother. It was fun. It was beautiful. A youth group from 2014 to 2015. Yeah. And here's what Max Jr. said about that youth group. I learned how to respect other opinions and listen to others. To me, Rurapuk means to give without asking for anything in return. Healthcare from 2002 to 2014. Here's Senior Geraldo, who learned reflexology in our healthcare program. This is what he said. Rurapuk has helped me, the workshops, how to work with my hands. Now I teach my wife what I've learned. I do free therapy. Rurapuk has helped me learn about the body, to read and study. And that brings us up to 2018 until the present with our program, Growing to Think. Now, I believe we have a little video that explains Growing to Think.
This is the small village of Paraíso Alto. It's in Peru, and I am Rosita. I live here. I still need to walk a little bit more before I get to Rurapuk. What am I gonna be like when I grow up? Can I really be the person I dream about being? My teacher in Rurapuk says that everyone knows how to think. But if I think in a really good way, no problem will ever be too big for me to fix. No matter where I am. I love it here in Rurapuk. My teacher asks me really good questions that make me want to learn more. Then, we try out little ways to answer the questions. It's like working on a big puzzle with the whole class. I never want to stop learning. That's how I know I will reach my dreams.
Okay, so now I'd like to explain a little bit, as I mentioned before, and we just saw in the video, the Growing to Think project started in 2018. So I'd like to explain the Growing to Think program, excuse me. I'd like to explain a little bit how that happened. So as you've seen, the Rurapuk project had many different programs throughout throughout its history. And when we more or less were from 2015 to 2018, we started experiencing an identity crisis. In 2015, I had started a company with the idea of making the whole Rurapuk project self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is a good idea, but it happened, the company happened with a lot of confusion. The goals were not clear of the project and the company, and it was unclear what was the company, what was the project, and everybody became confused. The people in the project, the workers in the company, the local people, our donors, and even myself. There was a lot of unclarity because we didn't have, we hadn't planned well enough, and we didn't have a clear who and why. At this point, we asked a professional to come in and help us sort out things. And then a nice young man named Jesus Vila was that professional. He came and he helped us put the house in order. He helped us sort out our history, make a long-term vision, and helped us with branding, helped us with design thinking, and to really organize who we were, and where we were going to. So when we started Growing to Think, we really had a clear idea of who we are and where we were going. Okay, can we go to the next slide then? Thus, in 2018, with Growing to Think, we started teacher training to train teachers to be able to help kids think better. Okay, next. So in 2018, with the Growing to Think project, we began teaching math, science, history, social studies in a way that helped kids think about those issues and those subjects. So this is important because good thinking forms the whole basis of Baba's neo-humanism. In neo-humanism, Baba explains that it's important to have a rational mind and to study. And if you don't do those things, your thinking is not very good, and it leaves you open to geo-sentiment and socio-sentiment. And being open to geo-sentiment and socio-sentiment also leaves you open to being dogmatic and narrow thinking and not being able to make good decisions for yourself, your family, or your country. So, Growing to Think, the program was a way to teach critical thinking and neo-humanism in an organized way. Okay, next, please. So we did classes in Growing to Think for 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, and we were ready. As I mentioned, we had classes in math, language, history, English classes, in which we taught English, but in a way that was not just memorizing, but gave kids a way to think about how to speak a language so that they were thinking about it. So these classes were for children ages 7 to 12. And after class, they had a snack. So this was going on until 2020. Okay, next. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. And I think Mahajoy is going to explain then what happened when the pandemic started.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you for sharing the history of Rurapuk. As Dee Dee was explaining, Rurapuk is a Quechua word, and that word means people who help people. And we really wanted to focus on that and share how we've been trying to adjust to these times when we're not sure what's going to happen around the bend because of global warming, because of disasters and conflicts. Our planet is facing a lot of issues, and we have to be quick on our toes, flexible, and be ready to face whatever happens. And so 2020 came around. We actually were finishing our teacher training led again by Jesus Villa, who's also my husband. And we were training different teachers, not to be teachers in Rurapuk. We just wanted some people to come and join us and learn critical thinking and bring it into their own lives. And that was the focus for us. So you can see us wearing the green shirts. That was the branding of our colors for Rurapuk. So Jose Luis is in the back. He was teaching math, and then I'm there, and there's Jesus on the left. And then we have 4 of our trainees, and we were hoping some of them might be trained to become teachers in Rurapuk for the next year. So this was in February. We finished an intensive, I think it was 3 times a week, 3-hour or maybe more training in critical thinking. And they got their certificates, and we were all happy. And then we got news right about the next month, in the middle of the next month, that Peru was going to be on a lockdown. So when that happened, it was kind of like martial law. So people weren't allowed to leave their homes. People were not, so if you left your house, you could get arrested. It was a very, very stressful time. People weren't supposed to drive. There were marshals out in the street. It was a hectic and scary time because we didn't know what was going on. I know that for me and for Dee Dee, we didn't leave our house except once a week to go shopping, and that was it. And that was the rules. You weren't allowed to go out of the house except to shop, and you had a small window. And then that even became more, they separated by gender at that point. They're very strict gender ideas. So it was like women on Tuesday, men on Friday, or whatever it was, because they really wanted to make sure people weren't going out, having parties, or doing whatever. The difficulty, and maybe some people do know this, in Peru, they had the highest per capita death rate in the world. And so it's not that these were these draconian measures that were used because Peru is just making things up. It's because a lot of people work out in the informal setting, in the streets, as domestics, as taxi drivers, selling food on the street, and the chance of contamination is high. And add that with an unequal economic and healthcare system, and people were just, it was devastating. People, I think everyone knows a few people who passed away. And this was very devastating for children, especially. Their parents were not, parents were dying and children were left alone. Children had to stay in their house. And there were no online classes for probably the first year. And children couldn't go play, couldn't go in the street. So they were literally stuck in their homes. And so when this happened, we transitioned. We were, like everyone, weren't sure what to do. We transitioned to help with Amert. So Amert came in and did more on the ground, food, soup kitchen. But at that point, we were not sure what to do. So next slide, please. This is what I was explaining about we went back to our roots in a way because Amert started projects focusing on food and clothes, and we went back to those roots because the need was there to revert to that, which is not a bad thing, but to address the need. So Amert started soup kitchens and dispensing food, and then we did a little bit of a book drive, and we sent out books to the children in our program. So we had books and some clothes and school supplies because we knew the children weren't doing much in their homes. So that's the picture here of how that looked and what we were giving out to the community in Paraíso Alto. Next slide, please. How did we respond? So here is where we're highlighting the digital age that we've been talking about. Why was that important to go into the digital age? Like I was saying, we couldn't see the children. We couldn't leave. We couldn't go to the project. We couldn't go to the building. Luckily, and I'll get into this later, but luckily we had a good network, a digital network with the students. So we started to think about maybe we should make videos, and that's how we would talk to the children. So we would, in my house, me and Jesus in our own places, we would make videos about English. We would talk to the kids and just say, everything's going to be okay, just stay in your house. And we would put that on YouTube, and so that they could look at something, because we didn't really know. I mean, we knew that the schools were completely closed and weren't reaching out to the students. So we're like, they don't have anything. So we weren't sure if they were going to learn anything during that time. So we started publishing videos on, at that time, I think it was YouTube. We already had a Facebook channel, and so we were putting the videos also on Facebook. So that meant other children could see it too. Next slide, please. Then we realized, hey, this isn't too bad. We could actually still have classes with the students if they can. Interestingly enough, most children have cell phones, or their families have cell phones. So we figured, what if we just tried online classes? So we started with Zoom, but we realized Zoom was too heavy of application. So the kids couldn't get onto Zoom. There's too much space it would take on their phones, because most of them don't have laptops. Some of them do, but then we thought, okay, what about Google Meet? That might be easier. So most of the kids, actually, they were very eager to do this. They coordinated with their parents, and because there's maybe one device in the family, so they found a way to share it and have our classes once a week. At that point, maybe we did twice a week. I can't remember, but we started doing science and math. We ended up hiring 2 of those teachers that we trained, and one of them was a math teacher, one of them was a science teacher, and we also gave English class. And we talked to our teachers about, we wanted to make sure these are digital courses, so please make this accessible to YouTube. So they would make their own videos and they would upload those to YouTube. They would do TikToks, and we'll talk about that later, but that way the kids could look at the work whenever they could, in the bus, or at that point, actually, they weren't leaving the house, but like whenever they needed to, they could look at their phone and say, oh, okay, let me watch the video again. Let me see the class. And it worked out pretty well. Next slide, please. So that now we are still doing the English class. Unfortunately, our teachers couldn't stay because they needed full-time jobs. It was a very dire situation, and we couldn't do this 2 times a week thing. They couldn't do that. So they did leave. Jesus and I continued to teach, and we focused on English, which is fine because the children are very motivated by English. And we developed 2 side teachers who are puppets, and they helped us with teaching English, and they make it more entertaining. So we developed our own channel on YouTube and TikTok and LinkedIn and so on and so forth, which I'll talk about later. But they helped us keep the kids interested, because we didn't want them to be bored. Sometimes it's boring to like watch things on. I think that the way the age is now, children really need a certain type of learning on the internet. Like, it's not like in the olden days of like, oh, I'm going to watch a video of a person drawing something. They don't like those anymore. They really need to be like interactive with emojis and like little like things popping out. Like they need to be entertained. So we tried to learn those skills so we could reach them. So next slide. Right, so then we focused very deeply into our online presence. We got a LinkedIn channel, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and it was really nice because being online helped us bring people from across the world. We got someone come and speak from Turkey, other people from Peru, someone from Mexico, a lot of people from the US, and they would come to our class and they would share about their lives, and we do a cultural exchange, and the kids would practice their English with them, and people would be happy. Oh yeah, we also had someone from South Africa come. So we were excited that the kids' world was expanding, when if we had been in person, they would have just been in their own neighborhood, which is not a horrible thing, but they wouldn't have met these people, and they wouldn't have known that those people in other worlds and other countries know who they are. So it was just a nice way to be like, we can connect with you, we can see you, we want to have a relationship with you, and even though you're far away and you're in an isolated spot, we can still contact you. So that was really nice. I think that the kids knew people were thinking about them all over the world. Next slide, please. So I want to share a little video. So this is Tuddles and Troy. Tuddles is the dog, and then Troy is the, wait, no, I'm saying it wrong. Tuddles is the frog and Troy is the dog. And we named them Tuddles and Troy because we wanted them to have a very difficult name in Spanish, because in Spanish, they don't have those kinds of tuddles, like that's not a sound that exists in Spanish. You don't say tuddles, like that's not a word. Or Troy, you don't say stuff like that. So we wanted to even give them names that would be help them practice English. So we said Tuddles and Troy. And even now to this day, they have like a little problem saying Tuddles and Troy. That's great. We just want them to be able to keep practicing and working on it. So we're going to show you a tiny video about what Tuddles and Troy, how they teach. And this is a TikTok video that we publish on our other social media places.
Hi, Tuddles.
Hi, Troy.
I wanted to talk with you because I'm a little bit concerned. I read on the internet that there is something called climate something. I don't remember.
Oh, I know. That's climate change.
Yes, that exactly.
Climate change is global warming, and that's when things get too hot. I mean, the animals could die, the plants could die, and there might not be any food.
That sounds awful. Is there anything I could do to help?
Well, there's one little thing. Maybe you could do something is use a cloth bag instead of plastic bags.
That's an excellent idea, Tuddles.
I know. You can try today.
Yes, I'm gonna try to do that today. Thanks for the suggestion.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's our stars, Tuddles and Troy. They're very smart. They know a lot. Actually, my mom was like, well, you should share the video of Tuddles and Troy. Those were very cute. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that. So Tuddles and Troy are the kids' teacher, and you can hear those are words that are not common. It's not that we're trying to make them understand everything, but just get a sense of how people talk to each other. So Tuddles is me, Troy is my husband, and we make these videos and we publish them every other week, and we say, kids, watch this please, and practice your English. So they're our little helpers, and I think the kids like them. Next, please. So where we're going, what's our next? We don't want to abandon our beautiful building. It's lovely. You can see it there. It's looking out over the town. Not everyone, but a lot of people know it, and it has a long history, as Dee Dee explained. It's over 20 years in the community, and it has a very good reputation, and we don't want to leave that, and we don't want to ignore it. We'll always respect that we have this property, we have an in-person place. So we're trying to find a way to do both. And one thing we're going to do is hopefully Amert will come back and help with the ollas comunes again, or like making more of a soup kitchen. And we will hopefully get that running again and feed people, because we've gone backwards in time. So as when the pandemic hit, the gains that we had educationally and then economy wise has just gone backwards. So we're back at kind of 20 years ago. We're back again. It's like a cycle. We're back when Aisha came and was like, look at this, we need to do something. And we're in that spot again in person. So Amert is hopefully going to be starting that soon. We do have a wonderful volunteer from Jamaica who is doing in-person reading for young children, because the youngest children had no access to education at all. They couldn't get on cell phones, they couldn't get on video, none of that. And so they just fell far, far behind. So Ranjita has a small group of students in person who are probably, I think, like 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe not that old, but that are working on reading in Spanish, learning how to read, learning how to sound things out, learning how to write, and that's going very well, and that's definitely needed. The other thing that we just started, which is a pilot program with the Casa Ilori in Costa Rica, and that's Didi Ananda Anuradha's project there in Costa Rica. And she also is going through a similar thing with their project. I won't go too much into it, but she was very open to collaborating with us because they wanted an English program, and they weren't able to do that because of various reasons. And so we said, why don't we collaborate, and maybe your kids could come to our project. So we're doing a inter-country English class online. Actually, they're doing it right now. And that's been going pretty well so far. We're just trying it out and seeing how that goes. And next slide. And I'll hand it over to Krishna Prema.
I stop sharing now at this point?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for that part of the presentation. And now we're going to shift a little bit, and we are going to have, Didi and Mahajoy are going to have a conversation with each other. And I'll let you guys take that over. So.
Okay, Didi. Hello. So my question for you is, why do we teach using critical thinking, and why are we teaching teachers critical thinking?
We teach critical thinking because there's a huge need for it. There, in the day that we live in, there's a huge amount of information out there. I remember when I was a kid, when I was in 6th grade, my mother bought me a set of World Book encyclopedias. And we felt that all the information in the world was in those encyclopedias. But it's not like that now. Now we ask Mr. Google something, and you can find out anything you want. And there's tons and tons and tons of information. So much information that people become confused. And unfortunately, a lot of this information may not be correct. So critical thinking helps us to put things in order, to find out what information is correct and what is not correct, and it helps us make good decisions. So that's why there's a real need for critical thinking, and why we think it's important.
Great. I agree completely.
Okay, Maha. Now I have a question for you. Why did we decide to do this presentation in a dialogue?
Great question, Didi. So we decided to do it this way because we believe that information is not the entire picture. When we think about design thinking, We're trying to help people understand experience. We're trying to help people communicate and create, understand, and not just receive information. So we started the presentation giving information to you all about Rurapuk, and that's just the base, because what we really want people to come away with is meaning about what does this mean to have done this type of work? Where does that lead to? What are the implications? How can I see myself in that situation and in that offering that we're giving? Because that's how we learn, and that's exactly how we teach the students. We don't give them lots of information. What we do is we say, how does this fit with what you know? Where do you think this kind of project could lead to? I mean, if we were talking to the children, we would say that, what do you think are the pitfalls of this? How did we, with our own background, decide to do what we did? Because we're not saying we're not going to just describe, we're going to see the whys and the effects, the implications. And so when we are in a dialogue, we're putting the audience into a spot of critical thinking as well, because they're going to sit back and put themselves in our shoes as we interact and as we talk. And they're going to start thinking, if I were in that position asking a question, what would I ask? Or would I have answered that way? Or would I have brought up a different point? Does that make sense to me? And so when we model conversation, we're modeling a type of critical thinking. And the same goes with dialogue in general. That's how we teach the children sometimes. I mean, we do different methods, but one way is we dialogue with them. And that's a Socratic method. Socrates would use instructional design, basically. He would start off with, what does another person already know? And then build on that to find the holes in it, or find where it's lacking, or where you would go next with that idea. And so when we have a dialogue, we're doing the same thing. We're building off each other. We're saying, okay, if you're accepting that, then you're going to accept the next. And that's another way of doing critical thinking. We really try to make sure when we did our own training, because Jesus Villa we also engage in the training. So when we did the intensive trainings, Didi, you and I were participants. And that was grueling. It was very grueling. But what happened is he didn't just say, read this, and this is what you're going to know. He said, okay, now what do you think? What does this lead to? And so we were pushed into a critical thinking spot, which is a lot more difficult than answering and repeating a question and repeating what we've read. It's like, why do you think that? And if you accept that, then what? So we got into a critical thinking experience. So we're trying to give that back to the audience. And we want to be interactive, because we believe that information is one thing, and then meaning is how we make sense of things. And that's what, Didi, you were saying about dogmas. There's ideas all over the place. And if we don't understand the meaning and the values and the bias behind any sort of idea, we'll just accept anything, because there's so much available to us. So that's why we decided to do this presentation in a dialogue.
Okay, Maha. Yeah, you're really right.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a
So,
question
Didi,
for me?
I do. Are you still doing the teacher training in critical thinking? And also, what is Thoughts That Bite?
Okay, yes. We are still doing training in critical thinking. We have a program that Jesus Villa set up that was used by the online by the Neo-Humanistic College of Asheville. And this program is available to other people who might want to use it. And we set up a small company called Thoughts That Bite that can produce this program or other classes or seminars in critical thinking. And we are dedicated to teach teachers critical thinking also, because that's how we how can I say, that's how we can promote critical thinking and promote good thinking. So that's what we do.
That sounds good, Dee Dee. That sounds really good. So just to back off that question a little more, what was Thoughts That Bite exactly?
Thoughts That Bite, we have a web page and we have a company that can promote the seminars or studies in critical thinking.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
Okay, then Maha, let me ask you, how does teaching English fit in with critical thinking? And how do you teach English in a way that promotes critical thinking?
Great question. So, kind of like what you said before, it's a tricky answer because part of it is if you have been trained in critical thinking, hopefully your teaching will reflect that. If so, that's why we focus on not skills necessarily, although, and if you look at our channels on YouTube, you'll see that there's videos about what is critical thinking and how to teach it. We try to stay away from the idea that they're skills because we want to make sure people are getting that it's a way of looking at the world. And that's a harder thing to explain to people. And so when we get into branding, we've had to make some choices about how do we explain what we do. But when we're talking, when we're talking at this event, I can answer it in two ways: the branding way, and then the way that we actually think it works in the pedagogical way. And so I'm going to answer it in the way of the pedagogy. We really try to, like I said before, start where the kids are at. And when we're teaching another language, we don't throw vocabulary at the students. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we give them like, this means this means that. But what we prefer to do is we say, for example, I'll do example, like if we say buenos dias, right? And then we say good morning. And then we try to start with what they already know, buenos dias, right? Like which part means good, which part means day, and we analyze what they already know. And then we think, okay, well, if I'm going to say good morning, which part do you think means good? And which part do you think means day? So they will use what they already know to learn something new, because what we believe is that, and this is what we learned in our training, you can't learn something out of nowhere. So you can't learn and you can't even hear unless you have the blocks and building blocks for it. So we believe the kids already have that. We just have to help them find it. So our job isn't to give and say, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to learn. We say, let's find what you know. Let's find what you know so you can go the next level. And the kids do very well with that. For example, in this, you might remember the mind-bending trainings we did where we had to think about what is hearing. Because in the approach we learned, hearing is something that happens inside of you and not outside. It's not a sound out there. It's what your mind picks up. So, there's that phrase, what if there's a tree that falls in the forest? Who hears it? The idea is you don't hear it unless you're there. So, and that's the type of learning that we have. So for example, if we say to the children, say cat, repeat cat, they're not going to say cat. They're going to say cot. Why is that? They can't hear that we said cat because they don't have the building blocks for that sound. So we're not going to just keep saying to them, say cat, say cat, say cat over and over again. What we're going to do is we're going to explain that hearing is different than actually embodying a language. So we say, hey kids, do you know that there's a sound that sounds a little like this and it sounds a little like that, and you mix those sounds together and that's the sound that comes out, because without that, they're not going to hear it and they won't be able to repeat it. So I went to a Waldorf school and there we learned songs. That was the curriculum I was there from 3rd grade to 8th grade. And from first grade, I think that's when we start languages. I don't remember. Anyway, I think maybe it's third grade you start learning languages, but it's not till seventh grade that you learn vocabulary. And so we would learn songs and we learned poems. And we thought that was ridiculous at the time because we'd be like, I'm in Spanish class or I'm in French class. We learned French and German and we wouldn't be able to say anything to anyone. So it's kind of like, huh? But we learned that approach to help us get the sounds. And we do that with the children. We teach them songs and we learn by singing. So you teach them a popular song that they like. They've seen like from The Lion King or something because they'll start hearing the sounds and then they'll be able to replicate the sounds. For example, I also taught when I was in Peru, very wealthy children, and I would do private classes because they'd be like, oh, you're from the States. Oh my gosh, yay. So we would have classes. And I remember two of the students who went to very, very wealthy schools and they were very wealthy students. They had like folders and folders of vocabulary, just like flashcards this thick of making sounds. And I remember just being like, huh? And that is what they were taught at school, to repeat and just memorize words. And then I realized they couldn't speak. I would say like, hello, how are you? They wouldn't know what to say. So we really try to stay away from this idea that we're giving them sounds and we're giving them anything. We're working from what they have. And they can speak pretty well. It's not that they know a lot of words. But if you talk to them, they're going to talk to you in a pretty like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Like, they'll talk to you like that because they've developed an ease with the language because they know it's not about words. It's about communication. It's about meaning. It's about relationship. And that's what we try to build. And that's how we teach English in a critical thinking way in Rurapuk.
Wow, Maha, that's really interesting.
Thank you. So, Didi, what surprised you about the online program Growing to Think in Rurapuk?
Well, I think the thing that surprised me the most was that it was very successful. In the beginning, I don't think any of us had that hope. We wanted to try it because we didn't have any other alternative. And we didn't think it would work because the kids just had little cell phones like this. They had to share it with their brother. They had to share it with a mother who was going out to work. They had limited data. They didn't have good internet connections. So we thought it was going to be very difficult, but actually it worked. And everybody kind of, they shared the phones. They bought a little bit of data. We helped some of the families buy more data. And we found that the kids got online and they learned and they kept coming back. So we didn't really have that hope and it surprised us. And it still surprises me to this day that even now the pandemic is over, we have really good attendance at our online English classes. So I think because our teachers are really good also. So that's what surprised me the most, that it works so well.
Yeah, it's great that it still works.
Okay, I think I have one more question for you, Maha. Let's see. What do you feel is difficult about teaching kids online? And how is it different from teaching in person?
Okay, great. So, well, one thing is that it's hard to do automatic feedback with the children because, like you said, sometimes they have a small little device and they can't read what we've put. If we did a PowerPoint, for example, half of them wouldn't be able to read it. because it's so small on their phone. And so that's a little bit challenging. And then automatic feedback. If we say something, we don't really know if they're going to respond. They don't have their cameras on because it takes up too much data. And so only a few of them can put their phones on. Also, they live in places where they might not want people to see where they live. And that's something you'd be very sensitive to, is that not for safety, but because maybe they live in a place that's a little bit more impoverished, or maybe they don't have the same, lamp posts or bed like someone else, and it could bring some shame. So we don't insist that they put cameras on unless they want. Like, we encourage them to, because we want them to feel part of a group, and we say, it's nice to see your faces. And if they feel comfortable, we really try to urge them to do that. Also, because we need to see their mouths. Sometimes they'll be saying, like, I don't know, burb. You say, hey, we were trying to teach you to say verb. They're saying burb, burb, burb. And we're saying, no, it's a verb. And we have to help them because, like I said, if they don't have that in their building blocks, they're not going to be able to do it. So we really have to say, like, put your tooth right there and make a sound, and make the sound go out and say verb, or else they'll say burb. So these are things that we have to see them for, and sometimes we just can't. And that's a limit that we have. The other thing is that it's hard to give homework because we can't see what they're doing. And even if we could, it's very unlikely they're going to ever look at what we give. So we used to do, we'd say, send us a picture or a video of you saying this. We had a video of SEO before, saying today's Wednesday. For example, we used to have them make little videos of themselves saying something in English. But then it was becoming a lot. So we just said, you know what, we don't want to stress them out. We're not school. We're an after school program. We're not trying to judge what they're doing. We're just going to let them engage with us and try not to make it like we're following what they do, because with written things, we couldn't respond because it would be on WhatsApp, and it's hard to respond on WhatsApp to something that kids have written because they're not going to look at it. It's just hard to do that. Some people have said, like, how do you know if what you're doing works? And that's a tricky question. It's sort of like how Dee Dee and I used to talk. It's like meditation. It's one of those things that if someone were to measure, and someone could, I mean, there's ways to do it, but measure how well you're doing in your meditation, it's a very difficult thing to prove to someone that you're meditating well. And that's the same with thinking sometimes. It's like, what's the measure we're going to use to say that you're thinking? We used to have children, the measure that we used to have is that children would do their homework and get their homework correctly. And we moved from that model because we realized in their schools, they weren't teaching them necessarily how to think better, but they were teaching them busy work a lot of times. So we decided to move away from that. So it's also hard for us to measure. What we do know is that we measure it by their participation. We see their participation, we see that they're participating, and that's really the best answer for us. I mean, it's hard to get people online. We can see nowadays it's hard to get people back online. Our kids come pretty much 15 to 20 every class, and these are kids who are motivated on their own because their parents aren't necessarily there in the house. But when they do come, their parents had to help them because maybe there's one device. So they all work together to make sure they could get onto class, and we're pretty surprised that they've kept it up. I don't know if that would be so successful in a different setting. They come to the class and they participate. And so how do you know that? So how are we having a good experience? It's like we do see that they're having a good time, they're participating. But then the other hard part is that there's inequality, like I mentioned before. Students in Lima and in Peru, the reason why it's hard to learn is not just because it's online, it's because the larger systems have not provided well for them. So why is it that they don't have good internet? Why is it they don't have enough money to have a laptop? These are all systemic issues that we can't solve in our program, but we are aware of them and we're trying to do the best we can. So as we're speaking of inequality, we've met with the students from Costa Rica and they're learning at a different rate than our kids. And that could be because during the pandemic, maybe they did have access to school. I don't know. It could be that they have a program that runs longer. They actually do. They have more resources to be at Dee Dee's program every day for 3 hours. So we've already seen that some of the learning of our students is lower because of the inequality of the students, and not because of the students, but because of the conditions of the students. So also the good side is that, like Dee Dee was saying, like, they're coming. They're not dropping out. Sometimes their screens are on. They're getting more motivated now that the kids from Costa Rica are there, because they're like, oh, other kids want to learn English too. Okay, great. They're comfortable, I think, being online. Seems like they like it. They have their own individual time to speak. I was also teaching them in person when I taught them, and it's sometimes very hard because they'd all be talking at once. And now they're like, they talk one at a time because they're online. But in the classroom, it was like, sometimes a headache. So it's actually helpful for some kids to have that order, like I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak. And that's been pretty nice. So I'd say that there's one challenge. Dee Dee, you always tell me I have a lot of patience, and I think some things are just easier in person. There's something that's happened for the past 2 years, which is when I say apple, they say apple. And that's been happening for 2 years. So sometimes I get frustrated. But I feel like if this were in person, it wouldn't be, I'd be like, no, say apple. And they would just say apple, but it's been 2 years and they're still saying say apple. So we even made a Tuttles and Troy video being like, don't say. And I say that every class. Don't say. Don't say when I say. So I feel like that's the thing that happens online, because I think in person it'd be like, oh yeah, of course, apple. So little things like that are a little different. But I would say that's what's difficult about teaching kids. That's how it's different. Those are the good things or the hard things. And that's what it's like teaching online.
Quite interesting.
Yep. So Dee Dee, how do you think the needs in Paraíso Alto will change over the next 2 years?
Well, that's a big question. First, I think we have to a little bit evaluate what the pandemic did. And I think that we may not even know this for 5 years or 10 years, as basically these kids were not in school for 2 years. It set their whole scholastic career really far behind. There were some kind of online classes which weren't very good in those 2 years, but we don't know what that 2 years without school has done to them. Then, not only that, the economic fallout from the pandemic, because a lot, especially in poor families, maybe nobody in the family was working for 6 months, 1 year. So what did the people eat during this time? They ate whatever they could find, a lot of rice and potatoes, no? So we don't know what the long-term nutritional fallout is from this. So some things we don't even know now. As you said, Peru had the highest death rate from COVID, but it has not only the time of COVID, but the COVID after effect is what we're experiencing now. Then not only those things, but there's like a real increase in violence and crime in Peru. So we're dealing with a lot of unknowns and a lot of things that are worrisome about where the culture is and where it's going. So that's the things that we have to take into account now.
Yes, it's true. It's quite a change. And I
Right.
don't know, Dee Dee, if you have one last question for me.
Let's see here. What is the last question?
I think it's up a little.
What do you think is different about teaching the kids from Costa Rica and teaching the kids from Peru?
Oh, I think it's the other question about online.
Oh. I don't see that question. We answered the one about what's hard about teaching kids online.
So do the question right before that.
Okay. The why did we start developing an online presence? Sorry.
Exactly. Yes, perfect. That is a great question, Dee Dee. And this is part of the why we're doing this talk, because, and I think people can see in the history, this is why we did all that, because we needed, Dee Dee talked about our identity crisis. And that's one of the reasons. When we hired Jesus Villa, we realized our messaging was confused. Our messaging about what we were doing, who we were, who we were serving, why was a little bit convoluted. And that wasn't helpful for our students, the business, our donors, our teaching staff. It was too confusing and people didn't really know what was going on. So when we hired because Jesus Villa also worked with some other people, they looked at the entire system and they said, we need to use design thinking. We need to start making sense of how things connect and what is the product, what is the business, what is a social service project. Even the Margies were a little bit confused and they were like, who are we serving? Who are we helping? When Dee Dee's business came in and they were also inside the building. So that created more confusion. And the donors were uneasy about, a lot of focus was starting to go towards the business, which is not what it was intended for. And they decided not to give us a grant again. So we lost funding. So that's why it's an after effect of the situation that we weren't being clear about what's a social service project, what is the difference between a social service project and a business, who are the people we help when we're doing either one. Because you could have a social business, that's not a bad thing, but we weren't doing that because the people who were working in the business were doing one thing, the children were an entirely different population. So when we messaged out into the world, it was fine because we sort of were confused in our own bubble. But when we were trying to project out what was happening so we could get people interested, get donors, we were like, we're so confused and they're going to be confused. So that's why our online presence had to follow that type of clarity. So we redid the website. I actually did it myself. It's rurapuk.org. We got professional photographers to take pictures. And you can see our website has beautiful photos because we hired someone. We put a lot of effort and money into it. We got a new logo. We found a professional to redo our logo. We found a professional video company. They're the ones who made this beautiful video with the young girl going up the hills. We realized that if we don't have a digital footprint, we wouldn't be trusted because in our day and age, who knows how to look for a website? Only those who have the website. But if you're just going online and looking for things, your YouTube channel might pop up, your TikTok might pop up, Instagram might pop up, and you get to show that you exist in a digital form and that you have following and people see you, because that gives credibility to everyone. So when we did all of that, I think we can see that there's a more cohesion in all of our faces when we face out. So you'll see that we have like similar colors for our website. We have similar colors for our YouTube channel. And, it's all the same messaging. And we're clear that we're a social project. We're funded by Machu Picchu stars. Our project is under Amert/Amertel, and that's another story. But then there's also, we are doing little programs, which is Growing to Think inside under the project. So all that ordering helped us communicate, which is what design thinking does, communicate what's happening. And so it actually wasn't hard. And Didi, when you said you were surprised that it worked, it is a little surprising, but it's also like before the pandemic hit, our team had told us we needed to do this. And we weren't necessarily convinced. But for 2 years before the pandemic hit, we were building our social online presence because we knew this was happening. And our team told us we need to get our online self in order. And so when the pandemic hit, it was kind of like we're going online because we had already prepared everything so that we could go online. Without that, we would have been scrambling. So I think we knew that this was the way of the future, and that's why we're happy to be online still. Of course, we could argue about certain things that don't work, but we're okay with this. And I think if you all would like, you can check us out because we have a lot of places you can see what we're doing. And I think that's helpful for the students too, to know that it's not just the building. We're all over the place. People can see that we're in classes. We're talking to you all. And, we talk to people all over the world. So it's also good for the kids to know. So that's why one other thing. I just wanted to put a plug about this sweater because this is a sweater made by some of the women who work up there and who are part of the knitting project. I mean, not knitting project, the company. See, I'm even still like in the same language. For years we were saying knitting project. It's not a project. It's a company. It's a business. So like that, we had to reprogram ourselves to remember it. So this is just a nice thing to remember that like we do have different looks and we do have different areas that we affect, but we need to just keep them in order and explain them properly. So that's why we started our online presence.
Okay, Maha, thanks for making that all clear. We need to review it again and make it more clear every time.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you guys. What a wonderful presentation. What a wonderful conversation.